We go. Good evening. So we are learning a topic which is a standalone topic tonight. We're taking a little bit of time to focus on something which I find intriguing, which is a series of dots which I don't find are often connected, which is the topic of the year is called the silent tribe. We're going to go explore some of the underpinnings of what makes the makings of some of the characters that we meet and we love in the story of Esther. So one of the interesting things about the individuals we find is that we are at an interesting period in time in Jewish history. We usually look at all of Israel and we say there's 12 tribes of Israel and all one big melting pot and we're all very happy and brothers and sisters. But the truth is, at the time that the exile actually happens, around the time of this of the end of the first Beis Hamikdash, at that point in time there really are only two tribes left. Now, yes, there's Levi/Kohanim, and there's a whole bunch of them. We're going to hear about them later on when they return to Zion. But really, technically speaking, there are only two tribes, and they are Yehuda and Binyamin, because those are really the only two tribes left in the south. The northern tribes, the eastern tribes, all disappeared, or all exiled previously, already a century beforehand, at the times of Sancheiriv, the king of Assyria. So the Assyrians did multiple military tours. They first took away the eastern tribes, then they took away the northern tribes, and then they took away all the tribes have disappeared, except for Yehuda and Binyamin in the south, which now gives us a fresh reading when we read the words we're about to say on the night of Purim. What do we say to ourselves? We say out loud as a community the first of the four verses we say along with or just before the Baal Koreh, the person reading, is Ish Yehudi Haya b'Shushana biro Shmo Mordechai ben Yair ben Shimi ben Kish Ish Yemini. So it's interesting that we hear that he's an Ish Yemini. Ish Yemini doesn't mean he was right-handed. That wasn't his persuasion of how he threw the ball or wrote his edicts. It means that he was from the tribe of Binyamin. But then there becomes an interesting point about the beginning of the pasuk, which says that he was an Ish Yehudi. Yehudi at this point in time may mean he is Jewish, but it could also mean he is Yehuda. Right, which means to say that Mordechai presents to us as a very interesting individual who shares the commonalities of being from a tribe of Yehuda and a tribe of Binyamin. He seems to be this pivotal character between the two tribes of exile. That's going to play an interesting role. So as we go through this, it's important to sort of expand and understand this dynamic and how it relates to Mordechai. In fact, the Gemara is so troubled by this. Just in case we're not the only people who pick up on this, the Gemara is so troubled by this, and the Gemara says, maybe it was at his mother's side, his father's side, right? Maybe it was the one side was Binyamin, the other side was Yehuda, because it seems like it's a discrepancy in description as to who is he? Who is this Mordechai? He seems to be a little bit of both. So let's go a little further in the Megillah, and we now hear that when Esther is abducted by the king, so she's under strict instructions to not tell anything. We're told, "Ein Esther mageres moladetov esamo." So she doesn't tell anybody her people. But you notice it wasn't just her people she didn't talk about. What did she talk about? Moladetov, her birth as well. Now, all she needed to do was just hide and cover up her passport to show which nationality she was not. What about her birth? What was the significance of birth? Something about her birth might indicate more than just nationality, but possibly even tribal association as well. Why is she hiding that? Why is that a part of her identity that she's not uncovering either? It seems that there's something more central that is going on over here. So we have this curious individual. Mordechai seems to be related to Esther in some way or another. Chazal discuss some of the variations or possibilities, but she herself will not reveal not only her nationhood, but her tribal association as well. And finally, the last piece of that we're going to look at, these are all very well-known ideas, and this is essentially the pivotal piece of the entire Megillah. This is the turning point of where things start moving from passivity into action, where Esther, who's an individual who seems to be, so to speak, the object of the sentence, becomes the subject of the sentence, where she stops being the lackey of somebody else and she becomes the leader. So at this point in time, the heroine emerges when Mordechai says to her the incredible verse. Masha, welcome to close the door if you want to. It's this time of Mariv, we always have this extra traffic. So Mordechai says, remember this conversation is going on via agent. Says a shliach going backwards, forwards, trying to tell us what's going on over here. So he tells her, Don't think you're going to escape. Don't think you're going to come out high and dry. It's not going to work. it's not going to happen that you're going to be able to escape. If you will be silent, if you think that you're going to keep quiet, and there will be salvation which will come from another place, and you and your father's house will be destroyed. And who knows if this is not the reason why you arrived in your station, in your place in society. Notice something interesting over here is, if we want to follow through the theme of Jew, we're called Yehudim and Binyamin. Yehuda and Binyamin, listen to how the sentence reads now. Don't think that you can escape. Don't think that you will escape by from all the, so you could say Jews, but you could also say from all, perhaps the Judeans, right? Meaning maybe you'll be able to save nepotistically, maybe you could save some of those from Binyamin, maybe you could save some of the folks in your family. But don't think that, because the Yehudim, the Jews will, and the Judeans will have a salvation from another place. And you and your father's house will be destroyed. So it sounds like, meaning you and Binyamin, something about your father is going to be destroyed as well. Interesting. Now, you don't have to read it this way. You can read this that Yehudim means to say Jews as a whole. But if there is a dynamic between the notion of who is a Yehudi and who is a Ish Yemini, who is a person from Judah and who's a person from Benjamin, then there is an interesting dynamic which is going on, which is unfolding over here. And the question, therefore, is what is the emphasis? Why is it that we have to hear more about her as a scion of the base of Vich, of the house of her father? Meaning, wouldn't it suffice to say is that your legacy, your name, your destiny is all going to be ruined? Why the father's house? It's like that's throwing in the kitchen sink. What did her father have to do with any of this? That's the question which is it seems like it's a little bit of a low blow. It's not fair to her to put this to do this. I'm sorry. Okay, so
Can I just ask
yeah, sure.
a simple question? You said from the house of Yehuda or the house of Binyamin.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I always think of all the tribes that we come. So I missed this part.
No, it's fine. So the other tribes are already exiled, unfortunately. Meaning, what happened was that in stages of Jewish history, the 10 tribes of the north and east were already exiled by the Assyrians. Then what was left was this last bastion of Jewry, which was, no, it's fine. The last bastion of Israel was Judah and Binyamin. Yehuda and Binyamin in the south. They were exiled by the Babylonians. Therefore, it's essentially Judeans and Benjaminites who are in Babylonian exile. So there's this dynamic, this dichotomy of who's who. Mordechai seems to be his bridge character who seems to be across both. Esther is in the conversation. There seems to be this dynamic between Yehuda and Binyamin in that conversation, and there's something about her and her father's house, something about Moladatah, about her birthplace, which is central to who she is as a savior, as a heroine. Right? The question is why? Why is that so central to her? And what is she redeeming? What is it about her father or father's house, the legacy that she's trying to redeem? As we're going to have to try to work out, specifically central to her and her legacy. It wasn't just that she happened to be a good Jew at the right time. So the first place we can look, Ilana.
So is she from the tribe of Benjamin?
Yes, she is from the tribe of Benjamin, like Ben Mordechai is, and so therefore that's the juxtaposition from Beis Avich, your house, and the Yehudim and the perhaps the Judeans. So let's reverse to somebody who is also in her family, and notice all the parallels as we learn a little bit about him. Okay, the person that we're going to look at right now is an individual by the name of Shaul HaMelech. Okay, we've looked at it before. There is a little bit of background also. I'm going to put on the mute, but please feel free to jump in at any point. Okay, there's just a little bit of background. Please feel free to come back in. Okay, so the Shaul HaMelech says we're told about the following. This is our introduction to Shaul. We've never met him beforehand, and Tanakh tells us in Shmuel Aleph Perek Tes, Vayhi ish mi bin Yamin. There was a man from Binyamin. So the first thing we know about Shaul is he's also from Benjamin. Ushmoy Kish, and his name is, this man's name was Kish, Ben Avichail, Ben Seror, Ben Bechoras, Ben Afiach, Ben Ish Yemini, Gibor Chayil. Okay, so he's an Ish Yemini, same description as Mordechai, because Yemini means a person of the descent of Binyamin, and he was a Gibor Chayil, so this person's name is Kish. Okay, now, why does that name sound familiar? Because if you remember Mordechai's description, back in the first source, is Ish Yodia b'Shusha b'Roshmor, but Mordechai ben Yair ben Shimi ben Kish, right? So if we're assuming that there's telescoping here, meaning to say it's clearly Mordechai is not 4 generations from the Kish in Shmuel Aleph, because that would be an unbelievable amount of time. but assuming that we're talking about, we'll call it central nodes on the generational chain. You know what I'm saying? So if you're looking at the family tree, some of the bigger, stepping stones are highlighted along the way. And if that is true, then it's interesting that Mordechai is specifically associated to this person called Kish. And he's called an Ish Yemini, which is precisely what Kish was. Kish was an Ish Yemini. He was a Benjaminite. Good? So the first thing we see is that it's clearly the same family strain, and the Megillah is trying to accentuate that. The Megillah is trying to make us think about this reference point, think about this person called Kish. Let's do a little bit of research. Oh, who's Kish? Well, let's find out. V'loi haya bein u'shma Shaul. He was the father of Shaul. So Shaul HaMelech was in the same line as Mordechai, ultimately coming from the Kish line. Bachur tov atov. He was a young man. He was a good man. Ve'enish mibnei Yisrael tov mimeno mishichmo v'mala gavo mikol am. He was good. He was the finest of fine, and he was a head and shoulders above the rest. That idiom comes from here, comes from Tanakh, because he was literally a head and shoulders above the rest. He was a very tall and handsome fellow. Okay, that's where that particular idiom comes from. And we know that we're not going to read all the details right now, but he loses his donkeys. And he's trying to find the donkeys, and he and his lad are out in the fields. They're looking, and the lad says, "Well, the seer is around here. Why don't we go consult with him?" And they decide they're trying to find out where the Beis Haroeh, the seer, is, where this prophet is. So off they go, and they come to there's women by the well, and they say, and they start talking to him. They have this long conversation about where he is. The Gemara says they wanted to engage in a long conversation. They thought he was really dazzlingly handsome. They wanted to have a long conversation with him. And then in Pasuk Chof, they say to the following. So he comes to the house of the seer, and he says, "Where is the ro'eh?" And so Shmuel says, "I am him. I am him." Pasuk Chof, he says, "Those donkeys which are lost to you, hayom shloshos hayamim al tosem el es libecha lahem ki nimsau ulemi kol chemdas Yisrael halo lecha lechol beis avecha." He says, "Don't worry about donkeys. You got a legacy to be building, and that is the legacy of the house of your father." Oh wow, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Those are the words that Mordechai had said to Esther. Is if you don't do this, if you don't do this crucial action, you and your father's house will be destroyed. Well, what father's house? Well, that actually is a phrase he's borrowing from the way that Shmuel HaNavi is initiating Shaul. Shaul HaMelech at this point in time has not said his response, but he at this point in time he's sort of listening to this. All he was doing was trying to find the car keys, if you know what I'm saying. It wasn't like he wasn't out here to become a king. And now he's being told this whole mission and future and past and Beis Avicha, and then this whole it's sort of like the same kind of moment in that way is that don't get lost in the grass. Don't get lost in the weeds. There's more to talk about this. Vayan Shaul vayomer haloi ben yamini anochi mikatnei shiftei Yisrael. So he says, I can't be the king. What you're saying to me does not make sense because I'm the least of the tribes. I'm mishpachti hatzeira mikolish bachos shiftei Binyamin, and I'm the smallest of the families within the Benjamin. Not the right material. Sorry. Why did you even insinuate that I have such properties? So it's almost like Shaul HaMelech, which is sort of fast forward, a number of generations. It's kind of like the Esther conversation there, right? Well, here you're a king, but I'm not really a king. Here you're a queen, but I'm not really a queen. Am I going to do this? Well, the stakes are too high, but the legacy of your fathers and your tribe, right? So there seems to be the same kind of dynamic which is happening over here, as to a person who does not feel themselves worthy of being that person, and it goes further because yeah. Sorry.
Well, it's not so smart.
No, Karen.
Remember? I'm sorry. Do you remember? I was just thinking of Moshe when he went to Mitzrayim for to speak to Paro. And he also didn't feel that he was worthy to go. Right,
you're right. So one of the greatest hallmarks of a good leader is them thinking themselves not worthy. So it's an important rule to remember during primaries. But be it as it may. So so here you go. You're right. This is really the hallmark of a leader. So it's interesting. What's so fascinating is almost like the negotiations Mordechai is having with Esther already echoes of a negotiation which happened earlier with somebody in the same family line, right? So here you have, and now it's Mordechai who's also from the same family line trying to negotiate with Esther who's in the same place. So Be it as it may, he convinces Shaul. He takes him to the sacrifice. And he anoints him the next day, and he tells him to go out. And there's this very fascinating story when we're learning Malach as Shmuel Aleph, because we did it a few years ago. And there's a whole story, and he says there's going to be a group of prophets, and then you're going to meet them, and they're going to start prophesizing. You're going to meet 3 people over there, and they're going to be carrying these kinds of foods. It's like a whole business, and each thing happens exactly in sequence as it was supposed to. And Shaul HaMelech comes home, and he receives Shaul, and he goes back to work. That's what we have. Look in Saul's 2. Vayomer David Shaul Elov. So the uncle of Shaul says, "Vel naroy, not achtem." He says, "No, how was the trip? You were away for a few days. Everything all right?" We couldn't find the donkeys. We went to Shmuel to find them. So tell me, what did the prophet say to you? He said that the donkeys were alright. But he didn't say anything about the rest of the day. The oil, the anointing, the sacrifice, the prophecy, that business he left out. Doesn't that sound familiar? Who was another person who became a monarch but wouldn't tell anybody about the whole business? Well, that was Esther, right? Esther was the one who became the queen, but she wasn't telling anybody. Now, what she was withholding was information of her birth. This is a little bit different, but there seems to be this what we'll call lack of willingness to so to speak share who we are, who we really are, our worthiness of this job. It seems to be part and parcel of this fascinating, right? Ilani, yes.
Who's the uncle?
Oh, good question. So this could be, if I'm not mistaken, I didn't need to double check. It could be Avner, who's Avner ben Ner. Okay, so who's asking? But at this point in Tanakh doesn't give us specifically who it is. But interesting. By the way, what happens after this then is that so Shaul carries on his work, and he's like, oh, okay, guess you found the donkeys, right? And then they carry on working, and then Shmuel HaNavi calls everybody together, and he says, remember a little way back then you asked me for a king, and I found the king, and everybody's like, who's going to be the king? And everybody gathers together in the midst, it's a beautiful ceremony, and they're all looking around which tribe is it going to be from, and Yehuda's sort of getting themselves ready to go onto stage, and then Shmuel HaNavi comes over to the tribe of Binyamin, and everybody's is wide-eyed, and then he goes over to this family, and he goes over to the family of Kish, and then they come over to the area of the family of Kish, and this is where we pick up from here in source 3. He comes to the tribe of Binyamin, and the Matri family were so to speak captured. Not doesn't mean captured, but Shmuel HaNavi moves towards them, and it's clear that his intentions are to find a king among them. Shaul ben Kish, and now he comes to the seat of Shaul, who's about to become the king by Nimsa, and his seat's empty. He's just not there. He's not in his seat. So, and so he quickly consults, and he says, was there somebody else over here? He says, in the pantry. So where's the king? The king is hiding. So bring him out. It's not like he can hide, He walks out and his NBA profile, right? So it's he's out there. Everybody notices him. Can't hide. He says, wow, let the king, long live the king. Also an idiom which was taken from here. So now, at this point in time, if we think about it for a moment, he has another expression of this very extreme humility. This extreme humility where he knows he's the king. He's been told he's the king. Now's the coronation. This is it. What's he going to do? They're going to choose somebody else. God's going to change his mind. No, but he's in the pantry, so he doesn't want to have to take on the robes of the monarch. And then what happens is that people see this. Do people like strong leaders? Do people like pleasant leaders? The truth is, we probably need more pleasant leaders, but people like strong leaders, right? People who are going to say things very rashly and brashly and tell that everybody else is bad and good. So it turns out that people sense the hesitance in Shaul HaMelech, and this is what happens. So then Shmuel reads them a riot act, and he tells them what's going to happen. So he sends everybody back home, and he tells them this is what kings do, right? There's going to be taxes and all the things that you didn't want, that you thought you were going to be all good. Well, here it is. I'm going to leave it over here for you folks. And the then there were the folks who were touched by God. They went with him and they accompanied home. This is the king. This is amazing. But there were other folks as well. There always are other folks. This guy is going to save us. The man who's hiding in the pantry, the man who can't tell us what happened. He's going to be the king. You think he's going to save us from our enemies? He can't stand up to us. He's going to stand up to the folks on the outside. Foreign policy. He's going to be able to stand up to Russia. Really, nothing to talk about. And they disgraced him. Everybody else was bringing them these meal offerings. These folks never did. And what did he do? And he was silent. That should sound familiar, because that's precisely what Mordechai was saying to Esther. In fact, it's the same word. He says, "Im hacharesh tacharish ila kazais." So now the image starts growing a little bit now. So now what Mordechai is really saying, what Mordechai is quoting, because Esther no doubt has read these psukim, is if you're going to be silent in the face of those who say you can't be a leader, and you're going to therefore not take umbrage when you need to do what is necessary, and it's going to be what we'll call strong actions, then you and your father's house will be destroyed. Right? So meaning to say there's something that Shaul HaMelech left and he didn't do correctly that needs to be corrected now. So the picture is becoming a little fuller. And what ends up happening is Vayomer Amel Shmuel. What happens is the next step, just skip to the story over here, is that Shaul HaMelech does not take action against these folks, but then he's called into action because a war ensues on the east bank of the Jordan. There's a city called Yabesh Gilad, or an area which is now surrounded by the Ammonites. Nachash is the king, and he makes a very simple proposition. He says, if you just remove your left eye, then everybody can be tax-paying servants to me, and that'll be fine. Very, very fine fellow, it sounds like. And so they say, give us 7 days, and he says, ha ha ha, I'll give you however long you want, and then send me your eyes, please. So what happens is that they make a plea to this newly initiated king. Shaul HaMelech thought he'd be doing speeches at starting with new ship ceremonies, but the first thing that he got was the siege in the east, and so he comes out there and he fights them. He gathers all of Israel, fights them. It's a remarkable victory, and they beat back Ammon. At that point in time, all the followers of Shaul said, so let's go seek out those folks who didn't like you, right? All those people who didn't bring the mincha, we have their addresses, email, and we know we can track their phones. We'll take them out for you, Shaul HaMelech. No more problems in society. And Shaul HaMelech responds, they say, who are those folks who said you're going to be king? We'll kill them right now. Today's the day when Hashem made a salvation in Israel. It's today. A salvation day is not going to be a bloodbath day. We're not going to kill our own at this time. So that's what Shaul HaMelech essentially insists. He backs down. He digs in to his decision of macharish, by keeping quiet. Right? He says, I was right by not killing them then, and I'm right by not killing them now as well. And in fact, by the way, actually, if you look at the Psukim in Mishlei, which refer to this, it says, Boz l'reo chasar lev, that a person who disgraces another person is lacking of heart, v'ish tvunos yacharish, and a person who of knowledge will be quiet. And that's really quoting these psukim, almost like lauding and saying, what a wonderful person. She has Shaul HaMelech, who has the opportunity of killing people because of his own personal insult, and he doesn't do that. What a laudable, and we should all be like that. People insult us, we should just let it, like water off the duck's back. Shouldn't be an issue. But the truth be told, the Gemara actually says that it's for this reason that Shaul HaMelech started losing his kingship. This is already the loss of his kingship. You say, why? It's such a very good characteristic. It's a wonderful thing for a person to have. Says the Gemara. No, the reason is because you may be an individual. As an individual, we should all be aspiring to be people who are ne'elav ve'enon ma'alivin. We insulted and we don't insult, right? That people cut us off in traffic and we tell it's all right. It's not the end of the world. We'll get there 3 seconds later to the next light where we all wait together. It'll be all right. So it's all right to do that. That's the kind of people we should be. But when we wear the crown of monarchy, when our seat in society is a little more than us as a human being, as an individual, so a seat is of a station in society, represents something, then you don't have the right to just waive your dignity. You represent something. So if your office is being insulted, then you should take umbrage. If you are the governor of a particular area and they go spit, and somebody goes and spits in your face, there should be repercussions for that, because they're not spitting in your face as an individual, they're spitting in the face of the seat of government. that person needs to be taken care of. And so that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says that Shaul HaMelech at this point in time should have been a little more strong about his so to speak, his seat. And that's why this is it's the same Achilles heel which leads us to the Haftarah we read in Pasha Zachar, which is where Shaul HaMelech is now confronting Amalek. Notice, by the way, another parallel is that out of the 3 times that Amalek is fought head on, it's really 4 times, but 3 times in Tanakh that it's fought head on, 2 of those 3 times are fought by a person from Binyamin. One is Esther in Megillah Esther, and one is Shaul. Right. So notice, by the way, that the double fight in these 2 generations against the Amalek. When Shaul HaMelech did it, he didn't do it fully. Why didn't he do it fully? So the accusation that Shmuel HaNavi says to him, which you read in the Haftarah, is as follows in source 5. He says, Shmuel, you may seem small in your own eyes, meaning you may be a humble person, you may be a worthy person to get the Midos Award and everything. People should all be like you, Shaul HaMelech. But you have a station. You have a seat in society. Hashem made you a king. You're not just yourself. And Hashem said, eradicate these sinners, these Amalekites, and you didn't listen. You didn't listen to them. Right? So Shaul HaMelech was not willing, so to speak, at this point in time, to take that strong hand necessary to be the king, even though as an individual. He was acting still as an individual in the same way that he was kamacharish, as he was silent when people insulted him. He was also somewhat silent when it came to the will of the people, when it came to, they said, we're going to kill everybody, every last one of them. What a carnage, is that really what we're supposed to be doing? He had chemna, he had this graciousness, or this mercy on the people of Amalek based on the crowd's popular belief at this point in time, and Shaul thereby lost his melucha. So it's the same, so to speak, Achilles heel. It's the same problem all the way through, which seems to be winding itself all the way through. So it is interesting. It seems to be just in sort of the bigger picture of things that Esther is really inheriting, so to speak, the story of her predecessor. Right? So the first king from the house of Binyamin was Shaul. The last king that we have, at least in Tanakh, who's the king from Binyamin or queen from Binyamin, is Esther. So they're the parallels of each other. And Mordechai is using the language of the story to emphasize to her that the problems that Shaul HaMelech made, don't make the same mistakes. Don't be quiet. Don't be too personal. Be grand. Right? Be something bigger than yourself, because that's what you ought to, and that's what you owe to society. That seems to be the conversation which is playing out. Right? So that's the harmony. When we read Tanakh, we need to read the harmonies, not just the melody, okay, of the story. So, but it's more than that. So the truth is that it actually is more than that. The Gemara actually says that it starts earlier than both Esther and Mordechai. We have to go further back. Why so? So the Gemara tells us a very beautiful thing. I'm sure that we've heard this Gemara in various different variations, but the Gemara is to be found in Megillah, Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, on the topic of Purim, but it says the following. Bischart in source. This is actually source of bottom page 5. Bischart tznius shohasa barachel zachsa v'yatsa mimenu Shaul. Because of the tznius, how do you translate tznius usually? It's a hard modesty, right? So because of the modesty that Rachel had, that's why she had a child. She bore forth a child who was the king, who was Shaul. Because remember, Rachel has Binyamin, and Binyamin is the father of Shaul. Bischart tznius shohasa barachel zachsa v'yatsa mimenu Esther. Because of the modesty that Shaul HaMelech had, that is why he begot, ultimately he was the patriarch of Esther. So we see that the Chazal essentially put them all 3 in a line, right? So it's not just looking at isolatedly Esther and Shaul. We need to take it one step back. We need to look at the triad, essentially, which is all the way up to Rachel. So it seems that the unique value or the unique characteristic which combines all 3 of them is this word tznius, right, which is this modesty. Now we can apply that in the case of Shaul and Esther. This tznius is, so to speak, the sense of not wanting the seat, not wanting to be there. That seems to be a laudable fact. It seems to be good. The Gemara is going to explain what.
There is another element. There is a Yefei Torah. Rachel was Yefat Torah.
That's true.
Shaul was very tall, and
that is true.
Esther also.
That's true. You're right. So actually, the words itself play that out. Meaning to say, what Dina is saying is that this is not just simply about just this characteristic, but there was a lot of other common denominators which seem to be very explicit in the words. 100% correct. What is interesting is ideologically, it's saying is out of all the things that Rachel did in her life, what was the one thing which was this hallmark characteristic which allowed her to beget a child? Was Shaul, and in fact, he picked that up, and that was what allowed him to have the same child. So it's just a very, very powerful message. It seems to be that we're called the this hallmark characteristic. So where do we see this in their lives? Like tznius in the life of Rachel. If we would be asked the top 10 characteristics that Rachel expressed, I don't know if that we would have arrived at tznius. I'm not sure if that would have been modesty would have been that trait would have automatically applied to it. Other things, yes, but I'm not sure about that. We would have been the one, and sort of perhaps in today's common day and age, the use of the word perhaps might be certainly different. So we have to try to understand what really is being said here. So let's try to pick this apart. The Gemara says the following: second line of the Gemara. So when Yaakov introduced himself to her at the well, he says that he is the father of the brother of her father. Now the Gemara says that's not precisely true. That's exactly true, right? This sounds like the tampering with the shidduch resume here a little bit, right? I don't know. It doesn't work exactly, right? He's a cousin. Right, let's do the family tree quickly for a moment here, folks. Okay, so Yaakov's mother is Rivka. Rivka's brother is Lavan. Lavan's daughter is Rachel. They're cousins. He's not his uncle, right? So Ella Amala. So the Gemara says, no. What is the pasuk really telling us? The pasuk is conveying to us that he was trying to tell us something else. And what was that? He says Amala min sabili. He puts his right knee on the floor, and he says, "Please, Rachel, will you marry me?" Amra lei in. She says, with pleasure. Miu abba ramahu v'lo yachalt lei. He says, but my dad is no goodnik. He's a deceiver. He's a crook. He's not going to allow this to happen easily. Amar lei achiv ana baramaos. He says, I am his brother in deceit. So what's Yaakov Avinu really saying? Achi aviyahu. He's not saying the relationship. He is saying, I understand, I'll deal with folks like your dad. We'll work it out. We'll make a plan ahead of time now that will ensure that this marriage, this eloping, will occur. Amar lei umi shoy letzadiki lesugui baraminyosa. She's just come out of seminary, and she meets him, and he says, I can trick him. She's like, are you allowed to do that? You're like, Yaakov Avinu, you come from the family. Yes, like you're allowed to trick people like that. Is that appropriate? Right? Amar lei in. He says, you're right, you actually are allowed to, because im navar titabor v'imikesh titapol. You have to speak the language of the folks you deal with. If you're dealing with a crook, you can't just be, oh yes, I'll give my credit card details over to you because you asked for them. No, that's not how it works. Right? You have to deal with these crooks in a crooked way. Amalei umaram yusa. So she says, what are we going to do? What's the plan? Amalei it says Amalei. She says, he asks her, what is the trickery? Meaning, like, go into the mind of your father for a second. What would he do? What would he do if he knew that I wanted to get married to you? He says, I know that I've got an older sister. Her name is Leah. He's not going to allow me to get married before her. And that's what's going to happen. So he says, I'll give you these special signs that will know that it's that who we both are. When it came to that night, Amra hashta ki michsafa achosai. So she knows her sister's being switched in. She knows her sister's going to be terribly embarrassed. I mean, can you imagine at the wedding hall? Everything's there. The flowers, the arrangement, the guests are there. The music is going off, and then it's Skara, it's Leah. Can you imagine how unbelievably embarrassing that would be for her? She's going to be stuck under the chuppah by herself. It says masartinhu l'niala. She gave them over to her sister. And that's why Yaakov did not really realize. What? It wasn't there till now. That's why she got out. That's why she was able to produce a Shaul. And finally, the Gemara says, "What was the tznius that Shaul had?" It says, "Dvar melucha lo higid lo es asher amar Shaul zacha ben Esther," because he didn't tell anybody he was a king. Okay, so now let's analyze this for just a second. I understand that Shaul HaMelech's actions of not wanting to tell anybody that he became the king, I think that's a fair assessment to say that that's modest, right? That's Tanua. He's a Tanua person. But I don't know, if you were to see this whole story, right? So Yaakov in the well, his brother in trickery, what's he going to trick? How are we going to do it? And then she goes and hands over that. What attribute, what characteristic would you say that Rachel is displaying over here? Empathy is good, right? So empathy is she feels her sister's pain and say, how could you put your sister through that? That's not tznius precisely, right? That's not exactly tznius, right? So it is a little funny here how to call that tznius. So Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, in reading this Gemara, says a very beautiful thing, and that is if you fast forward in the story to later on when the children are being born, and Leah has all these children, Rachel has no children, and then what happens is that Reuven comes back to the field. He's found these mandrakes. Okay, mandrakes have got fascinating properties, and Rachel then asks for them from Reuven, and Leah turns to her and says, "Hama'ad kachteches ishi." Now it's not enough you took my husband. Now you're going to take the Duda Ebony, you're going to take the mandrakes of my son? How can you do this? Now, think about this for a second. Like, Leah, Leah, she gave you the simanim, she gave you her husband. And now you have the gall to say, now you're taking my husband, and now you're taking the plants? Have some perspective, Leah. And the answer, says Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, is because when Rachel gave the simanim to Leah, she was able to convince Leah in such a way that Leah really believed that she was the one Yaakov wanted to marry, and that this was not a trick. That's how far Rachel did. Now, if you think about this for a moment, we all like to give gifts. We all like people to know that we give gifts, right? We like to sort of drop a hint somewhere that that we're involved in in this elaborate scheme that we do for people, right? So we like that feeling. Rachel's tznius, her modesty, was the fact that she concealed herself so well in this whole scheme that Leah really thought later on the fact that he loved Rachel more was really actually taking her husband, because she thought that really she was supposed to be married to Yaakov. That's tznius. That's the absolute expression of self-negation that Rachel did for her sister. Because if Leah had gone in and knowing, okay, well, you know what I'll do trick number 1, trick number 2, trick number 3, whatever the simanim are. It's a big discussion in the Mefarshim as to what they really are. But if she were to display these tricks, but she knows that really Nebuch, I mean, it's like can you imagine what a Nebuch situation that is? But she never thought that. Not from day one, because of Rachel. So much so that she could say this to Rachel. So that's tznius. This means to say that tznius in this expression over here is the most extreme form of self-negation, right? Self-negation, where you see about Shaul, he becomes king. He doesn't want to say. That's the same hallmark attribute that Esther is displaying, and Mordechai is now trying to pivot the other way. Yes, Ilana.
A person who gives tzedakah anonymously
Yeah.
is sneered. It's the same kind
Yes.
of thing.
100%. When you remove self, when you're removing self to a certain degree, where you don't need to be the most prominent of people in this experience, then that's when tznius comes in. Yep, that's it.
That explanation is really goes against the psukim.
How so? How so?
She keeps on naming all those children, so her husband will come back to her. So how could she believe? How could Rachel make her believe that her husband loves her? It just really goes against the psukim itself.
Well, let's just go clarify. They got married 7 days apart from each other, right? So what happened was that first Yaakov marries Leah, and then he marries Rachel. So from Leah's perspective, there's two wives now, and she sees that Yaakov Avinu is more in love, is more connected to this her younger sister.
The name comes so much later.
Correct, but at this point in time, she thinks she's the chosen wife. She thinks Rachel is the second come over here. And over time, she sees that her husband is spending more time and has more terms of endearment for Rachel. So she feels that what was really supposed to be hers is being taken from her over these years, which is why she names her children as an expression of that. But never does it cross her mind, according to this perspective, that it was not justly hers in the first place. That's the argument. So that would be the way to read this. Karen, yeah.
I don't know if I agree with this so much. Not you, but
Yeah.
Rachel. And we're talking about Shaul and how he didn't wasn't showy, and he was very he didn't want to be in your face, and then we're talking about how Mordechai wanted to make sure that Esther didn't follow the same path as Shaul, and really Rachel. I don't know. I think that what Rachel did was wrong, frankly. Really, think about it. She had the person that was supposed to marry her sister. I don't know. I mean, we all talk about, wow, she was so pious, she was this, she was that. I'm sorry. I think that she should have, I don't think that this was a place that she should have done that. I think it was wrong. And it wasn't fair to Leah either, by the way, because throughout her life, she knows he doesn't love her. So why was that fair to her? There's nothing fair about this.
You're right. You're right. So listen, we first of all, we live in an era which does this value, this kind of level of sacrifice is not necessarily a value. Just to appreciate the society we live in. But you're right. The question is can we change things? We live in a society where we think we can change everything. If we just don't like something, we'll just write a blog post and then the world will come behind us and get behind us. But that wasn't necessarily the patriarchal world that Rachel lived in. So could she change this? Could she change this? The answer may be no. And so the question is, if she can't change this situation, what is she going to do about it? Is she going to live in negativity, or is she going to be able to find a way to deal with it?
Father's deception, not hers.
No,
Right.
but you're talking about Shaul, how a leader has to be a certain way. You can't be somebody who just says, no, it's okay, it's all right. You have to be able to stand up and lead and be strong. So I guess when I look at Rachel, I think she had an opportunity here to be a strong woman and to not give in to something. I don't know. I'm sorry. Maybe that goes against everything that we.
No, so Karen, or maybe that's what we're exploring a little bit over here. Is that maybe that extreme with only that extreme might be negative. Now, the division it seems to be by Shaul HaMelech is personally actually it's a good thing to be mena ne'ela ve'eno ma'alivin. It's better to be the one who is insulted rather than the one insulting.
Not when you're
right. But not when you're a king.
Yes,
when it comes to Rachel, it's personal though. That's what it is, and she made that decision by herself.
But this is why Esther comes and does the tikkun.
Good. So that's where Esther's coming in. So Esther's trying to fix this, Dina, as you're saying, is that this is the necessary step to sort of speak rectify this. Now, I think the pivotal moment, I think the crux of the whole issue actually exists around her son, around Rachel's son, who's not mentioned in the Gemara, but we've looked at three individuals, right? We've looked at Rachel, Shaul, and Esther, and the Gemara lines them up all having the hallmark trait of tznius. I would say that it perhaps goes around, and the crux of this whole issue is Binyamin himself. Because remember that this is perhaps why it is that Binyamin himself has two names. Why is that relevant? Because Binyamin actually was born in suffering. He was born at a terrible time, really on the death pangs of Rachel, the deathbed of Rachel. And he has two names, one from his mother and one from his father. The name from his mother is Ben Oni, and the other one is Ben Yamin, right? Now, what is interesting about this is how are these two names, how they relate to each other. So the Ramban says a very beautiful thing. The Mefarshim spent a lot of time talking about this. Take a look at source 6. He says, "Anochem beinai." He says, what seems to me in my eyes is correct. Ki mo, it's the second paragraph on page 6. Ki mo karasa ben oni v'ratzas olema ben aveli. What was she saying when she said ben oni? What's the word on? Comes the word onain. Onain is that terrible stage between death and burial.
Oh,
right? So it's that sort of that limbo state of burial. And so what she's saying is that she understands she's dying. She knows she's dying, and she says, this is the son of my death. That's what she's saying. It's terrible bitterness that she says about this child. Milechem oinem. From the pasuk in Hosea, lo yachalti bo'oni, as another pasuk in Parshas Kisavai. So what this means to say is that, and if you think about this for a moment, one of the things about an onen in halacha is an onen ein loy peh, doesn't have a mouth. What does that mean? There's very little to say. And frankly speaking, if we knew what we were doing, we wouldn't spend too much time talking to an onen. It's not the time to talk. How were they sick for so long? And it was a sudden. Now that's the shiva. We'll talk about the shiva. Now is not the time to start asking those questions. An onen is ein lo peh. It doesn't have a mouth. It's not appropriate to talk to them. Is that fascinating? Because what was the hallmark trait of Shaul and Esther was macharish, silence. That was this one element of this sort of silence. They were not an active character necessarily. However, the father, so to speak, changed Binyamin to some degree, and so aviv asalai min oni koichi. But the word on can have another meaning, and that is on from the word strength. As an example, miloshan reishis oni. The bracha that Yaakov Avinu gave to Reuven was koichi, my strength. But reishis oni, this is the beginning of my strength. There was the first child bearing that Yaakov and Leah had was through Reuven. That was on. That was strength. So what essentially he's doing is he's pivoting the same word, the word on, right, from the silent, passive, so to speak, receiver to a powerhouse or expression of energy. And he goes to another pasuk in Yeshayahu. V'lachen korasa Binyamin ki hakoach o ben hachoizek ben hakoach ben hachoizek ki amin bo gvura v'atzlacha. So therefore, why does his father call him Binyamin? He wasn't disagreeing with Leah. What he was doing was he was actually capturing one of the aspects of what the name of Rachel had said. Rachel had said Benoni, which has a dual meaning, the meaning of silence and mourning, and son of strength, right? Because remember, she had to give birth to him in all this pain, right? In the death pangs. So there's both of those meanings. The father says, I'll adopt the second of those meanings, which is the strength. How will I do that? I will do it by calling him Binyamin, the son of my right hand. Right hand symbolizing, and nothing against ambidextrous or left-handed people, but generally speaking, the stronger hand. So he captures the one element of who Binyamin is supposed to be. Because sometimes you think of this as an argument between the father and the mother. It's not. It's really the positive viewing of this child. And I would wonder, even in a certain sense, if that's precisely those two ideas are embedded deeply in the spiritual psychology of who Binyamin is. And really, Shaul has both of those. He has this sort of Benoni, this silent, passive individual, person who is such refined characteristics that other people attack him and he doesn't even respond. That's the Benoni side of him. But he also has the Binyamin side of him, and that Binyamin demands of him certain very strong actions at certain times. And when Shmuel Hanavi sees that he's not doing that, that's when the Melucha is torn away from him. Now fast forward to Esther. Comes along Esther, and the same question becomes: is which side of that equation are you going to adopt at this point in time? The Benoni or the Benyamin within you as well? In fact, it takes a one step further, just the one Maharal's idea, and then we'll close with this because it has been a long time. I apologize. But the Maharal says a very beautiful thing. And he says that, in fact, the reason why it is always Binyamin who has the upper hand, so to speak, on Amalek, is because Binyamin, in a certain sense, is the scion of the house of Yaakov, and Amalek is the scion of the house of Esav. Right? They're not the whole house. They're the so to speak the prince of each of those houses. But if you think about it for a moment, Esav is the firstborn. Binyamin is the lastborn of two lastborns, right? So he is the youngest child of the youngest son married to the youngest daughter, right? So he's the youngest of the youngest of the youngest, right? Who's fighting against the oldest. And says the Maharal explains that what happens is that when you have the youngest, so to speak, the smallest, the tail end of the generations, you know how it is. There's a very wonderful individual in our shul who's an elderly man, and he says to me he was the youngest of 11 children. And he says, when I was a baby, they practically forgot that I was around. After 10 children, the baby's sort of left on the side. That's how it goes. They'll all fend for themselves. So Binyamin is this, is in the side. He's this quiet child. He doesn't get all that attention. The curfew doesn't really apply to him in the same kind of way. He's kind of like on the side. We all know how it goes. So he says that is the expression of the notion of tznius. In a certain sense, what does tznius of Binyamin mean? It means to say that there wasn't the fanfare. There wasn't all this Torah. They didn't have the big Shalom Zohar in shul when Binyamin was born, and the blue fireworks, and it was like, oh no, same caterer, same oil, let's go. We know how this works. So Binyamin really was kind of like under the radar. That under the radar was what enabled him to fight so to speak, the powerful firstborn expression of Amalek. Why? Because the most outward expression of a human being is their hands, where they're able to reach, their creativity. That's what we call the Yadayim Yadei Esav. That's the outer world. What is the innermost point is we move furthest from the hands, which is inwards, into something which is not even physical, which is the voice. Where is the voice of Jacob, the voice of Yaakov found? It says in the youngest, in the smallest, in the most unnoticeable. So ironically speaking, says the Maharal, it's precisely because of the tznius, because of that underlying characteristic, which allows Binyamin to actually realize the koach of the spiritual persona, not the physical persona, which is to be found in the more powerful ideas. In fact, if you wanted to think about this, look at all Sefer Bereshis. Sefer Bereshis seems to be a polemic against firstborns, right? That all the firstborns don't seem to do so well all the way through, right? And the firstborns get very, very upset about this along the way. And what is interesting about it, we can think about all the examples, but in a certain sense what it is, Rav Hirsch says, is that it's a polemic against power. Because the firstborn is the powerful one, is the celebrated one, is the one who's given all the extra karate lessons, is the one who, right, they're the ones who get it all, let's be honest. So the Torah is trying to reorient ourselves as to what really matters. And it's perhaps that which matters, which is the least noticed, is what needs to be able to matter. However, in order to matter, there needs to be the right amount of tznius and the right amount of action, and that's what goes on over here. So perhaps this is an idea which originally learned in the works of Rabbi Avram Rivlin, who was Mamashkech when I was in Kerem Biavne. Just fascinating. He has a book called Hester and Be'ester. This is about just 2 or 3 pages out of the 400 of them. But it is a very beautiful perspective in trying to link up really essentially 4 individuals, Rachel to Binyamin, and the dual entity of Binyamin as it expresses itself both in Shaul and in Esther, and that's tikkun that is made out of full generations. Yes, Ilana?
I have a question. If it's the least noticed, that's what matters. The least noticed then has to assert themselves even harder.
Yes, in order to, at the right time. Exactly.
Correct?
100%.
That's what matters.
Yep.
The least noticed will become assertive and will grow strong.
At heart, they need to remain the most sanua. But there's times where they need to assert what policy is. And this is the moment where Esther needs to assert herself. She can no longer be the passive one at the back of the train. She now needs to drive the train. There's moments in history, and that's why I think At Ubeis Avich Tovedu is the house of your father. I mean, you say back to Shaul, back to Binyamin, back to Rachel. Can you fix this? Can you use this moment for a moment to step out of character? Fascinating. Folks, good, fascinating, lot to think about. Again, it's just like we need to read Tanakh as a symphony, and not just as a melody. Folks,